to have a podcast that's set up that you send to people in advance of their arrival. So it gives them
Yeah.
insider knowledge before they arrive at your property of what they can expect and get them excited about their future stay with you and that will help with customer retention. That will blow them out of the water. No one else would be, is doing that, or very few that I know of would be even doing that or thinking of that. Now, certainly
Yeah.
there are people and podcasts out there that are speaking to some of the topics we've just broached, but I'm talking about, to your point, a private podcast specifically for guests. It could be when they arrive, but it could also be before they arrive.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. Are you ready to put your hotel on the map in a whole new way? Stay tuned as my guest reveals how video podcasting can help you engage with travelers, tell your unique story, and turn your property into a global destination. My guest today is Sheryl Plouffe, co-founder of ICONMAKER. Before entering the business world, she spent 2 decades as a television anchor, mastering the art of communication. Today, Sheryl will share why it's time for hoteliers to step out from the behind the scenes and use video podcasting to elevate your brand, attract global guests, and position themselves as leaders in the hospitality industry. So welcome, Sheryl, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sam-Erik. Really excited for this conversation. It's a unique take on what it is that I do specific to hoteliers. So I'm really excited for it.
So maybe we can get started. I mean, you had a long, distinguished career in the network and so on. Could you just speak a little bit about that, and then also the transition to that you were co-founding the ICONMAKER?
I started doing television when I was 18 years old. And so I really spent my entire adult life in front of the camera in some capacity, and mostly in television. And I've done a few commercials. I've taught television performance to college students. I was also a news manager for several years. And so really that has made up the bulk of my adult life is being on camera and in television specifically. I did some radio as well. And then in 2017, I transitioned that into a business, and initially as video marketing only. And then it really expanded into business advisory. More specifically, today with Icon Maker, me and my two business partners help entrepreneurs, coaches, and consultants become icons in their own niche by helping them leverage podcasting. So today, that's what we're going to talk about specific to your audience. And I'm hoping to be able to bring ideas forth that make you really think about podcasting in a different
Excellent. I'm looking forward to learning quite a bit about that from you today also. But in industries like hospitality, where many prefer to stay behind the scenes, how can what we call maybe self-promotion help professionals unlock new opportunities that they didn't know they existed before?
Yeah, well, I think it's when you look at the business aspect of it, right? There are various ways that you can get your business in front of other people in order to grow and expand. And certainly public relations, press, PR, and there are agencies obviously whose specialty it is to do that is one way. Advertising agencies and a variety of different agencies are typically the route that people go to in the hospitality industry. And we're talking about big budgets with big teams, and at the end of the day, I mean, I think that podcasting is something that gets overlooked because, and here's why I love podcasting specific to the hospitality industry, it's about people and it's about conversation. And so I think it's a perfect fit for the hospitality industry in general. And not to mention the fact that podcasting is a very intimate modality. What other format is there where you have two earbuds in your ears and you're hearing someone's voice literally in your head? Right? And I know you spoke about, Sam-Erik, you talked about video podcasting, and certainly video is very important. I think there are more opportunities if you were to go down the path of video podcasting rather than maybe audio only. But, audio only is also a path. It can certainly be a path if that's what suits you best and what suits your environment
Yeah.
best. But ultimately, it's really about looking at how are we generating business? How are we getting eyeballs on our property, on our hotel? and inviting guests to think of us first when they come to this destination.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, there are some misconceptions, and when I talk to hoteliers, they are worrying about the self-promotion aspect, and that they don't want to have the spotlight shine on them. They want the spotlight on the hotel. How can we? And also, then they feel sort of a discomfort associated with being in the limelight. And so, maybe you can speak a little bit about that. What are the things that they should pay attention to, and that they can overcome this, which is everyone has the same feeling at one time in their career?
Hmm. Well, I think it has to do with what is the intent behind the podcast in and of itself. I think for the most part, I would say that the destination itself is the star, and that you would probably want to look at your podcast being crafted in such a way so that the hotel is the star, not necessarily the person who's conducting the interviews or who's facilitating or doing the execution of said podcast, whether that's, interviews and such. So I think that's where I would, look at it first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is also overlooked in a way that using the hotel as basically, as you mentioned, the hotel or the destination is the star, and so you really talk about that, and then you expand the conversation. And there are some examples. I'm not getting paid to advertise a Datai resort in Langkawi, but they are excellent in actually talking about the nature walks, the nature resort. They talk about the environmental issues, and it's very often that either the general manager himself take you out for a walk on a video podcast, and he points out some interesting facts. And also, particularly during the pandemic's time, he was spent quite a bit of time on this podcast or video podcast for them to talk about these things. And but I think the self-promotion factor still comes kind of underlining why people are reluctant. And one of the things was, well, if I go in front of the camera, what I'm going to talk about? I mean, that's
Yeah.
happened to me quite often also. But maybe some tips, just so if I can get some of my colleagues to uh, jump in front of the camera to give it a try, what would be how will you go about developing maybe a episode or a season for your video podcast or podcast?
Well, I mean, I actually made a list of different ideas here. So, for example, it might be that you do local recommendations, talk about travel tips that are related to your location. It could be that you're talking about um, maybe famous people who've stayed at your destination in the past. You know, are there stories? And I think this is especially true of historic hotels. I'm thinking of New York City or in places in Europe, for example, where there might be some historical like stories that harken back to centuries ago, right? Who knows? Maybe even haunted stories and things of that nature that you could highlight as you know stories that have stood the test of time. It could be even just talking to interesting guests. I mean, what better place than hotels to be able to see a cross section of people from a variety of different cultures who are coming and going, and they all have a story to tell as to why they're there for that moment in time you know and so back to your question about the self promotion, if you take yourself as the host of the show, for example, out of the equation, and you think of yourself not as I'm self promoting myself, but I'm featuring the hotel as the guest, as the star here, you're just the facilitator. You're just the person who's going out and asking the questions. Somebody has to reach out to those people or to tell those stories or to interview others and have those conversations with others. But I think that if you get creative and you really start to think about it, there are probably unlimited topics that you could broach. It could be talking to your employees, you know, what are the stories behind the employees of that hotel? What brought them there? What is it that they love most about their job in serving others? And I don't know if you know this, Sam-Erik, but I spent 17
Oh,
years in hospitality myself. I worked at the Banff Springs Hotel in Alberta, Canada for several years, and then I transferred to the Royal York Hotel, both historical properties here in Canada. And one thing I can tell you about employees is they're guest centric, customer centric people that do everything they can to make that experience amazing. It takes a special kind of person to work in a hotel, and it's often long hours. And I think it would be fascinating to have a whole series of discussion with the employees, frankly. What brought them there? What drew them to wanting to work in this specific space? I think that there are untold stories that could be told within the scope, if you will, of a hotel, especially those who are with history.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a conversation with a hotelier that was opening a resort in northern Vietnam, and he was telling he took me back to the time when they were in the pre-opening period and the challenges about what it is to open a hotel 6-hour drive from Hanoi, where and if you forget something, it's going to take another day before you can get your supplies. But also what fascinated me in our conversation was how he singled out few of the staff that had no experience in working in a hotel, and how they kind of flourish during this time for the 6 months they've been working there, and how they feel that they somehow taken the role as a very important and take a lot of sense of pride what they're doing, and not to doing it for themselves, but they're doing for somebody else. That service element, and it actually touched me, and I thought it kind of resonates with me what you just talked about. That the general manager is not the star there; it's the place and the people that are working there, and also that and if you can get even some guests who are interested to be in front of the camera, that's even kind of always create an interesting episode because they can share a little bit what made them come to this area for their holiday and what is special for them, because everybody has their unique angle that makes it a good reason to tell that story. But I think also that there are, I can just hear now some of my colleague hotelier friends that, well, why don't I have the PR do it for me? What do you say to them?
Mhm. I mean, certainly that's an option,
Yeah,
right? It's an option to hire a PR agency or any type of agency whose specialty it is to drum up
yeah,
business. But I think that PR agencies have variety of different specialties that they specialize. They might not specialize in podcasting or really have any experience in this particular
yeah,
genre. So there's that to consider. But here's the thing about podcasting: it can actually be simple. It doesn't have to be a really complicated process to capture those stories. And I just want to draw it back, Sam-Erik, to why would we even want to venture to do this from a business perspective? The business perspective here is that you're building trust and brand authority through podcasting. I have to take a drink of water, pardon me. You have to build trust and brand authority. And that's where that comes in. Telling stories of your employees is one angle to that, showcasing local culture, sharing insights about the property itself, talking about behind the scenes operations. These are all things that are helping to build trust and brand authority that drive to um, awareness about your property. And the thing about podcasting that's exciting is that it's a global
yeah,
reach, right? And we see so many people, I think, especially travelers, who are listening to podcasts when they're on the plane or they're traveling and they're spending hours in an airport and even in their hotel. And we haven't even talked yet about podcasting from the perspective of a property where you could have your own private podcast that's specific to people who have just checked into the hotel. You know how we have when you check into a hotel and you have usually you'll have a card that talks about the local fare and the food and the attractions and things of that nature. Why not take all of that and put into a podcast that people could take with them in their earbuds? I think there are lots of opportunities. So, but yeah, could a PR agency do that if they have the experience with it? Sure, but I don't think that podcasting has to be really managed by a PR company per se. It could be your social media team who could execute on that, or just one a very small team. It could be one, maybe two people who could manage the podcast, really, at the end of the day, especially if you're doing an audio
Yeah,
podcast. If it's a video podcast, maybe it's a different
sure.
conversation because there is a bit more post production that you'd likely want to do around video. And then you have more opportunity to take that video and then repurpose that content for even more marketing
Yeah.
boost. So podcasts are a treasure trove of content that can be repurposed across social media, across websites, across newsletters, email, and you can take sound bites, you can take quotes, you can take stories from various episodes of your podcast and create and take advantage of the short form content, which is taking over the world right now.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that in the hotel space, destination space, travel space, whether luxury, adventure, etc., that you could really do well with that as well.
I agree with you. I mean, this what you mentioned that actually, if you want to get into the podcast or just the audio version, it is as simple as you pick up your iPhone and press record, to having something a little bit more sophisticated microphones, and you have a platform where it's uploaded, and a lot of that is the technology is there that they can make life very easy for you. And I think one of the big takeaways from this episode that we have a discussion, Sheryl, is that they talk about the different topics you can talk about. I mean, that will ease up your tension about worrying about that. How will people perceive this, and how do I sound in front of an audience? And when they meet me in person, I don't speak like that, and all these type of things. But uh, I mean, you have done this for 4 years, and I have done it even a fraction of that time. And one thing I learned that the best thing, just do it, and you kind of find a way your own voice. The longer you get on with it, isn't it?
And some of this is, some of it is
Yeah.
experimentation. Try things. No one's melting in the process of you creating a
No.
podcast. No one's going to melt. Everything's going to be okay. And you get to try things. I can't help but to think how fascinating it would be and I'm just thinking back to my own experience here at the Banff Springs specifically, which was a cross section of so many different people and cultures from all over the world who'd come to stay there, that it would be fascinating to walk around with a recorder and just talk to people who are checking in the lobby. Where are you from? What brings you to the Banff Springs Hotel? Oh, you're from Austria? What brings you here? Well, we're coming to ski at Lake Louise. Oh, that's fascinating. And who's with you today? Oh, these are my two kids. It's a story. And now, like, you're able to paint a picture of, we are a worldwide destination that attracts people from all over the world to come and stay here. It's saying something about your property by virtue of the fact that you've captured that moment in time with just by walking around. And this is just one example, but thinking outside the box like that, is a way to expand your horizons. And to your point earlier, if you think of it as well, it's going to sound uh, selfish or self-promoting, and yeah, it could come across that way if you let it. But if you let stories shine, if you let the other people shine, then that's what will
Yeah.
come through.
Yeah. I have had this idea for a long time, and I think this that the hotel could have their own little radio station. Yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, can you imagine you have
Yeah.
there's some of the favorite music people like to listen to, and then that's going to be in a playlist, and it doesn't have to be a live show. It can be all pre-recorded, but you still talk about from the weather and how the sea looks like today, and what happened yesterday, and what we're going to do tomorrow. I mean, there's 365 days worth of stories. I mean, if you really get into it.
Wouldn't it be fascinating to have a podcast that's set up that you send to people in advance of their arrival?
Yeah.
So it gives them insider knowledge before they arrive at your property and what they can expect and get them excited about their future stay with you, and that will help with customer retention. That will blow them out of the water. No one else would be, is doing that, or very few that I know of would be even doing that or thinking of
Yeah.
that. Now, certainly there are people and podcasts out there that are speaking to some of the topics we've just broached, but I'm talking about, to your point, a private podcast specifically for guests. It could be when they arrive, but it could also be before they arrive, as they make their reservation on their, let's say, their confirmation page or their thank you page. It's like, download, or follow our podcast for before your arrival so you know what to expect.
That's a fantastic idea.
And you could talk about the local
Yeah.
restaurants, and you could talk about your own restaurants. You could talk about the history of the property and all the things that we've talked about. And it doesn't have to be an ongoing, it could be a private podcast that's 5 episodes long, 5 short episodes that they can consume easily, gets them excited about their future arrival.
Yeah, I had this idea that if I would be a general manager of this resort, I would take them on my secret fishing place where I go fishing.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
to
That's
talk about
great.
those
Yeah, I
things,
love
which will
that.
be kind of very special, and it's only between you and me because you are the ones who are listening to my podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And talk about a personal
yeah,
connection, right? Being able to personally connect with each and every one of the guests who are coming to your hotel. Again, back to my point about the intimacy of podcasting. No other format really touches it in terms of that being in your ears and in your head. I think that would be fascinating to do that. And when you think about it, people are either in a car, in a vehicle, on a train, on a plane, getting to your destination. What are they doing? Well, they're usually, if they're on a plane, they're watching the in on board movie. So, well, and when you sit at your seat and you have, more often than not now, you have podcasting as an
yeah,
option to be able to, follow a podcast while you're on the plane.
yeah.
I just think that would be fascinating to
Yeah,
explore.
I mean, from my background now working in hotels, originally my definition about hospitality was the customer is king. That's how I grew up in sort of a pre-digital era. And now, if people ask me now, what is my definition of hospitality? It's community, and I kind of
Yes.
uh, gives me the idea that now in our this conversation today, Sheryl, is that you bring in the community into your, not only physically to your property, but also you bring in the community on your, for instance, a pre-arrival podcast, because people to have the hoteliers have this funny idea that their guests will eat 3 meals a day in their hotel. I think there's a rude awakening. People don't do that. They have a breakfast, but then they definitely like to go and try something else. And if there's a village where there's a nice local diner or a pub or a specialty restaurant, just to grab your iPhone or your recording equipment, go and talk to the chef. What is the seasonal menu going to be like? Because that will help him to also to survive in the business world.
And from a business perspective, what we're speaking about here are strategic
Yes.
alliances. That if a hotel can think strategically about aligning themselves with local business owners, right? Let's say in Banff, as the example here that's in my own mind, the hotel had its own, obviously beautiful restaurants, and but they do want to go off site and they want to go downtown Banff to explore some of the other fare. Well, what if the hotel has those local business owners and there's an alliance between them, and they might feature them on the podcast to talk about their specific place? Thinking about travel influencers, for example, people who are travel influencers who you could interview on your podcast, people who are travel experts, destination experts, people like this, these partnerships that you can have and have on your podcast to encourage cross
Yeah.
promotion. This positions the hotel as well as a key player in the local community.
That's very good. Uh, just to have going to another conversation a little bit about, do you believe that every professional should invest in building a, so to speak, a personal brand, or are there certain fields where it's less essential? And we have focused, of course, on the hotels, but in your business, Sheryl, you are consulting with a number of businesses in this regard. But maybe, what are your thoughts? Should is it the lawyer, the accountant will be? They can also do about this branding very well, or how do you feel about those particular professions?
I think it depends on the person. Yeah, I definitely think it depends on the person. I am not really as much of a proponent of trying to force someone into something that they feel discomfort around or objections to. You have to be, I think, a certain type of personality who wants to build a personal brand. And certainly there are massive business advantages as to why that's a good thing, because people connect with people. People buy from people, people connect with people, the human interaction. And I think, Sam-Erik, in a world now where ever more we're quote unquote connected, we feel disconnected, the more important those human connections are. And so I think that it depends on the person and the personality and their desire, to want to build a
Yeah,
personal brand. There are business advantages to doing so for sure, but I'm not really as much of a proponent of forcing that on someone who's really averse
yeah,
to it, energetically averse
yeah,
to it.
yeah. Of course, that's it's a very personal matter, and so on. But we have talked about the positives, but what are the opportunities for anyone that takes a brave step, and also the competitive edge they will have towards the competition, because it's after all a business case in many ways, not about outshining that you are a narcissist, that you want to be in front of a camera or uh, listen to your own voice on a podcast, but actually you're talking about something bigger than you, which I think is should be
Well,
looked at.
and there's something to be said too. If you yourself, as the hotelier, doesn't want to be the personal brand, okay, is there someone in your organization though who
Yeah,
does? Do you have a star employee? Maybe it's in the social media department or the publicity or whatever department it might be, who really kind of could step into that role and be that person who's the face of, shall we say, or the spokesperson, so that the hotelier themselves is not the person who's going to be doing that. Because there is something to be said for personal branding, from building a loyal following, connecting with people, driving direct bookings to the hotel through content and through that visibility. So I do think that there's something to be said for having a spokesperson, a person who is more of a front facing person. Now, that person doesn't have to be, again, always the star of the show. The property can be the star of the show, but maybe that person who has the visibility is not necessarily the hotelier themselves. If you don't feel like that's something that you want to do or that you endeavor to do, I think that it depends to, like, if you're a Gordon Ramsay-esque person, you need to be in front of
yeah,
the camera. You just need to. It's just part of who
yes,
he is, his personality and it, but that's not everyone's kind of.
correct, correct. Now, you have a background in hospitality, and I'm sure you're traveling with your husband to places and so on. Do you see any particular trends in hospitality that maybe we should, and hoteliers should be pay attention to, besides everything we talked about?
Yeah, so we travel mostly for baseball. Our son is a top level baseball player for his age, and so we travel mostly from baseball. And most of the time, those hotels are chosen for us. The team chooses where we stay. I wouldn't say we're staying in the most luxurious hotels, in that regard, but we did have a recent experience in Indianapolis where we stayed in a hotel, and they did a great. They had an after five. I don't know what they called it, but it was sort of an after five um, soiree type of thing where they give you a card and you have drinks and you can go and socialize in the common area. And we've stayed in many, many, many hotels over the course of many, many years. And myself, having been in hospitality myself, I've never really experienced it quite like that. And I thought it was great what they did. And what it did, Sam-Erik, was exactly what you said earlier, was really building community and allowing people to have a social time together and get out of their rooms and have a reason to come down and commune and be able to share a couple of drinks and a few laughs. Whereas typically in the hotels we've stayed in, though that's happening, but it's happening individual in clusters, not as a community. And so I really enjoyed that and thought, well, I think hotels would do better, might do better to use that strategy a little
Yeah.
bit more.
One of my favorite times when I was managing a resort in Thailand on Phuket Island. And so we had this, what we called, for lack of a better word, GM's cocktail, it was called. And so we sent an invitation
Mm.
to all the guests. Nobody was more VIP than the other one, but everybody was welcome for an hour together on over some drinks. And I usually got a lot of feedback, which I really enjoyed. I mean, all kinds of feedbacks. You kind of take close note what people are saying and what they were thinking of it, and that was sort of a. I would say that was one side is that you're developing a relationship with people in a different way. They were not the room number, but they actually got you got close to some people, and then also that they're giving some, if they're really interested in the best interest of the hotel, they want to also give you some constructive comments that you can use. And so all those worked very well. And that was sort of this particular hotel, that was a very popular way how we got to know people in better than ever. And I still have, after all these years, and that's quite some time ago, I managed the resort. I still have some friends who are living in Europe, and we these days we don't meet, but we always remember each other on some key holidays with either a phone call or a postcard. So
Oh, nice.
that's a great memory from that time.
Yeah, I think that in an era where competition
Yeah,
is fierce, people have so many choices, people can go anywhere, and what are we doing to stand out, and to what are some innovative ways that we could engage with our guests when they're there, engage with them before they arrive, engage with them to have them book with us and choose us, all of these different aspects of the customer journey, so to speak. And podcasting could play into one of those facets, maybe all of those facets in some way, shape, or form. But ultimately, we're looking at what is the customer journey, and how are we standing out, and how are we innovating the way in which we attract and retain our
yeah.
customers.
Excellent, Cheryl. We didn't talk so much about Icon Maker, but now for this latter part of this episode, could you share what are you doing, and what are the sort of the how can people contact you at Icon Maker, and what are the things that you consult with or coach people with?
Yeah, well, I mean, LinkedIn is a great place to reach out to me, or on Facebook or Instagram. I mean, you can message me and just reach out. I would love to help anyone who's thinking about podcasting but is kind of like there yet, thinking, well, how would this apply to me? Certainly happy to get on a quick call and explain how, just come up with some ideas. But ultimately, what Icon Maker is my business partners and I help coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs to build 6 and 7 figure businesses uh, by leveraging podcasting, by leveraging not podcasting for the sake of podcasting, but podcasting for the sake of building high trust relationships, which we believe is the foundation of good business practice and will be forevermore, despite algorithm changes, platform changes, the tactic du jour. The it None of that really matters when you build high trust relationships in business. And that's what we predominantly focus on through podcasting, because we believe that that is the best modality to do so, or one of the most innovative ways to do that today. So we also talk about strategic alliances a lot. We talk about high ticket offers. I mean, there are lots of different aspects to what we do at Icon Maker, but that's through the lens that we speak to it. And we've had great success so far. Our clients have generated over 4 million in their own sales so far in the short year that we've been operating. So we're really proud of that.
Excellent. Well, that should entice people to connect with you on LinkedIn, and you have a website, I'm sure, and I like to put that in the show
Yeah,
notes to.
sure. We do workshops, and we have a variety of different resources that I can share when you reach out. But it's iconmakerlive.com. And at iconmakerlive.com, you'll see what our latest workshop is, and you're certainly welcome to come and attend. It is a nominal fee that's donated to charity, because we believe in doing good and making money at the same time. And so we like to walk our talk. Nominal fee for that. It's a 4-hour deep dive. Be ready for it, because we talk about some advanced strategies. but we have glowing reviews of that workshop, and we'd be happy to have you there.
Excellent. Well, Sheryl, I really appreciate that you joined me today for this conversation, and I certainly enjoyed meeting you again, and also for your fantastic insights. So I think for all the hoteliers, I think you hope you took note, and if you didn't do that, please read. We will be on as a podcast, so you can listen to the episode again, or you can go to my YouTube channel and the Social Hotelier, and you can see the replay on this. So again, thank you, Sheryl, for a fantastic insight.
Thank you so much, Sam-Erik. Really appreciate all you're doing for the hoteliers who could be leveraging podcasting in different ways, and be happy to connect.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Social Hotelier Show. Make sure to visit our website, the Social Hotelier Show, blueberry.net, where you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or via RSS, so you never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we appreciate a rating in Apple Podcast. Or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that will help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.